day, everyone. Today, we have another story, the story of numbers. It's a story from a long, long time ago. We don't know how or when people came to discover numbers or who started making numbers first. Can you imagine human beings needed a certain type of language to talk to one another, to tell one another ideas and share stories, and so they developed the language that we spoke? But then, we had a story that told us how they started the language. Remember the story of communication in science? In the same way, human beings needed a language for their measurements, inventions, how far they went, and how many children they have. We don't know exactly when, and we don't know who first taught us the language of numbers. But right from the very beginning, from the time when human beings were on earth, they probably needed to talk about numbers just like we do. How many children do they have? How far is the river? How many caves are in the place? All those kinds of things involve numbers. And so no matter how far back we go, to find out about people living a long, long time ago, we never find a group of people who did not use numbers. Some only used 1 and 2. Some only used 1, 2, 3. One group of people who lived in what is now called South America didn't have any words that were just for numbers, but for one, they used the word alone and everything else was many. Because there aren't any written records, we cannot go back to where the language for numbers first began. But we think it was very likely that people first needed numbers for counting. Now, there is one method of counting that has been used by many people all around the world, and that is using the fingers. Some people use pebbles or stones. Some use sticks. Some used shells, some used notches, and some used tied knots in counting numbers. People in Malaya use stones in counting. Many people keep records of some sort of or other people in Malaya who will count the number of years and then paint the stick with a notch. People were talking for a long, long time before they started making marks for number curves. No wonder people started writing numbers. About 5,000 years ago, the Sumerians could read and write, and they also have marks for their numbers. Their way of writing, which we call cuneiform, because of the shapes of the marks they made. At that time, there were a lot of ways around it. They used clay to make tablets while they made marks on the clay with a stick and let the clay dry out. Came the Egyptians who were farmers. They also used signs for numbers. They used pictures of things they saw every day by their river Nile to represent the numbers. They saw quite a lot of lotus flowers and tadpoles, so they used them to represent numbers. The Egyptians put these pictures together so that they could easily read large numbers. Farmers could keep records of how much wheat they had. They became successful in selling their crops. The Babylonians came after the Sumerians and Egyptians. They developed a number system that is similar to that of the Sumerian numerals. They took the numbers of the Sumerians and changed them a little bit and started to make their own numbers. They wrote a mark on a number that was the first letter of the word name for that number. Then the Greeks came. Greeks used a numeration system named after them, the Greeks' numerals. An example is 5, which is called penta, while 10 is deca. Then the Romans took the Greek words and changed them a little bit, and we now have what we call the Roman numerals. Roman numerals are still being used until now. Look at the charts. One is similar to the different numerals. Many people believe that our number came from Chinese numerals. Where do you think our numbers came from? About 2,000 years ago, these numbers were found very similar to the number we write now, which is called Arabic numerals. But the Arabs did not use that. People from India traded with the Arabs. The Arabs bought food, clothing, and books from the Indian people and took them back home with them. Among the books was on arithmetic. We know that it got passed on to Europe because there was a page found in a book in Europe written on page 976 showing symbols that look very much alike to those symbols carved in the cave in India. So the numbers that we use came to us through the Arabs even though they did not use them. They became known as Arabic numerals. The Roman numerals didn't have a zero, but the Indian numbers have, and that meant that we could write down every number and place zero, thus 1, 2, 3, and up to 10. It's a very easy system, much easier than some of these other systems. That's all about the story of numbers.